Operation Sindoor was launched on the night of 6th, 7th May. It's been 3 to 4 days since it was launched, and this has been India's deepest strikes inside Pakistan since 1971. Multiple targets, 24 targets were targeted across 9 locations with unmatched success. But ever since, there has been much to unpack. Today morning, around early morning, Pakistan launched its own operation called Bunyan ul Mursoos. And ever since, we have been seeing an escalation of sorts. And then there's a lot of discussion on what kind of weapons are being used, different kind of air defenses, etc., etc. And to unpack that with me, I have Group Captain Ajay Ahlawat. Very pleased to have you back, Ajay.
Thank you for having me.
And let's try to sort of decode it a little bit for the audience better, because as you know, there is much disinformation, misinformation everywhere. It's become a war of narratives. Nothing is confirmed, and yet there is so much to learn, so much to unpack, so much to be careful about. So let's just start from what is this Operation Bunyan al Mursoos, and then we sort of connect it with what is happening now.
Okay, just to set the context, how an operation is named is also very significant, because it's not just a military strike, there is also messaging attached to it. We called ours as Operation Sindoor because it signified some kind of revenge for the lives that were taken in a very indiscriminate and dastardly manner at Pahalgam. And as you rightly said, those strikes were unprecedented in the sense that outside of war, we had not struck so many targets so deep in Pakistani territory. It was also unprecedented in the sense that extreme care was exercised in making sure that there is minimal, if any, collateral damage occurs to the civilians, and only the terror infra was targeted. And once again, it was a massive success. All targets were stuck, and ever since that happened, Pakistan has been seething with anger, and they have, they've gone again and again promising revenge kind of thing. So the operation that was launched today morning was that revenge.
No, I mean, you're right, of course. Operation Sindoor has been an unprecedented success because it targeted 100% of the targets that we chose to, attack. But coming back, there was always a choice for Pakistan to not retaliate and escalate further, because we went after the terror camps, not the military facilities, okay? But as you've been seeing, and especially after this Operation Bunyan al Mursoos has been launched, Pakistan has been now targeting, India's military facilities. So, let's just try to unpack it. Now, India has also started doing that. So where do you see the escalation ladder going from here?
So it's fairly simple as well as very complicated. We said we're going to attack only the terror infra.
Yeah.
Now they said we will retaliate. There are no terrorist camps inside India. So they had to choose something military. When they strike at military target on the escalation ladder, our natural choice is to strike at their military target.
Yeah.
So at this stage, as on the escalation matrix, we are more or less on the non-contact warfare, where we are realizing or utilizing the long-range vectors, where is the machines typically doing the fighting for each other. So fairly low in the escalation ladder, but there are possibilities of minor miscalculation which can literally take it a couple of notches in very short time.
Right. And before, we sort of discuss more about what kind of weapons, missiles, etc. are being used, what kind of air defenses are being, deployed from both sides. Let me just ask you a fundamental question, because often I think there are these fundamental questions that do not get the right answers. And as a result, there's a lot of, misinformation around that follows. Let's just try to understand also for the audiences, what are the differential risks between an attacker and a defender? So when we said Operation Sindoor is a success, how would you then assess these differential risks between what we did?
So the initiative lies with the attacker if there's an element of surprise. But if the defender is prepared, the risk for the attacker increases manifold. We announced that we are going to strike Pakistan, and it took us close to 2 weeks before we carried out that strike. So the defenses were prepared, they were expecting an attack. So the risk for attackers in this particular case was very, very high.
That makes it all the more a stupendous success.
That makes it more challenging, and when the outcome is as per what you wanted, the success is sweeter.
Indeed. And also now there is just so much discussion about what kind of air defenses. I mean, these you keep hearing about Akash, S-400, IGLAs, a different kind of manpads, etc. But just help us understand first the basics. What kind of a layered air defense system do we have? And then I would also ask you to compare it with the Pakistanis.
So, like you can compare an air defense system or air defense network to an onion which has many layers actually.
Okay.
So typically the outermost layer would be a sensor, a radar or some kind of electronic platform that sees the threat. Once the threat is identified, it's tracked. At certain stage, it seems that if we don't do something about it, it might cause us some harm. Then we start engaging it. Then that's where the layers start. So at the outermost layer for us would be S400, as the name suggests. The effective range is about 400 kilometers. Then coming closer, it will be Barak 8, which we also call MR-SAM, which is the medium range surface to air missile.
Yeah.
It can take on targets anywhere between, say, typically 100 to 250 kilometers. Closer is the realm of Akash, the homegrown surface to air missile system, which we are very proud of. Akash can take something from 25 to 125 kilometers. And as things closer, we start relying on the very short range air defense systems like the IGLA, which is the man portable system, and air defense guns like ZU 23mm Shilka or L70 guns.
Okay.
So this is what we call the layered defense. Some new elements have been added recently, which are called non-kinetic. Basically, ever since the UAVs or the RPAs and drones have started attacking, there are ways to disable them using electronic means. We also call them counter UAS systems and all that. So typically a drone works on two things. One, it needs guidance on where to go. And the second part of guidance comes through the handler, which could be through a data link or pre-program. So if you disable either of the two, the drone fails to carry out the mission assigned to it.
Right.
So that's where all the layers are structured.
So, and I mean, referring to all the releases from the Indian Air Force, they've mentioned that they have deployed a variety of these air defenses. So, in that sense, help the viewers understand, and also for my own understanding, what kind of missiles are they taking from the Pakistani side? What kind of drones are we taking? Because just to unpack, it doesn't make any sense for us to take down the drones using S-400s, no? So, I mean, could you just help us unpack what kind of, how does it work?
So what happens is the AD commander in the operation room has a very fused picture. The AD commander and the entire AD element knows the threat, the vector, the height, altitude, speed, etc. So based on the altitude profile, the speed profile, you can make out it's a slow mover or it's a fast jet. The resources are assigned based on the threat. As you rightly said, there is no point firing a $40,000 missile at a drone that costs just about $140. So it's a very intelligent system. Threat is identified, assessed, and an appropriate response is aligned with it.
And also, I mean, how does all this build up for the IACCS, which is the Integrated Air Command and Control System?
So IACCS is the nerve center where basically it links all the sensors with all the weapons actually. So once again, you know what is happening, and based on that knowledge, you decide we take down this threat using a very expensive S-400 or a low-cost L-70 guns.
Right. All right. And now that we have an understanding of the Indian side, what is the capability of the Pakistani air defense? Are they also layered like us?
On the Pakistani side as well, they have a layered system. In fact, any modern air force will have a layered system. Their weapons and sensors are largely Chinese supplied. And it's again, alphabet soup, mostly called HQ, and then the series start. Let me call out a couple of them.
Yeah.
HQ9B has a range of 100 to 125 kilometers. HQ9BE, which is the extended range, can engage targets up to 300 kilometers. They also have FD2000, which can engage targets up to 100 kilometers. This is their long range kind of umbrella. Coming to medium range, they have HQ16 and HQ16EV, ranges between 40 to 70 kilometers. And as we have VSHORADs at closer to shorter ranges, they have HQ7B and HQ7.
Right.
They have two European systems as well, which is Embada Spada 2000. And at shorter range, they also have Mistral and RBS 70 missiles. As far as sensors are concerned, they have a Chinese AWACS, which is ZDK3, which is similar to the IL-76 based AWACS we have.
Okay.
And they have an ARI 2000, which is similar to the Netra Embraer based AEWC that we have.
Right.
So that is what completes the layer on their side.
And if I asked you to now, for the layperson, I mean, how do you then assess the potency of it? I mean, do we have a kind of a capability parity there or a capability gap there when it comes to air defenses?
So the proof of the pudding lies in eating it. We've seen in last couple of days, we have taken out almost everything they threw at us, from ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles to low-speed drones. We have taken out almost about 90-95% of whatever projectiles came our way. However, on the other side, on day one, despite them being prepared, we did get through, and we've struck targets as deep as 200 kilometers at Bahawalpur.
Yeah.
And this morning, in response to their strikes, as well as a couple of days in the past, we have seen that our weapons have managed to take out an air defense battery, couple of C2 nodes, and a couple of other military critical infrastructure. At this stage, I would say ours are doing better than theirs.
Right. And that also brings me to the question of who are the backers of Pakistan here, because that, of course, gives a different kind of a twist to this entire discussion. So while we know that we have, in terms of capability, we outnumber Pakistan, we also talked about the potency or the impact factor or the quality. But then comes the factor of China and Turkey. Now, we saw that there was some news yesterday also shared by Colonel Qureshi at one of the briefings that Pakistan fired hundreds of Turkish Bayraktar drones. So in that sense, I mean, how do you see the situation unfolding? So while Pakistan may be inferior in so many ways, but then when you have these kind of backers to Pakistan, how does that tactically change the situation in the favor of Pakistan? To what extent?
The way we see Pakistan is not the way the rest of the world looks at Pakistan. I mean, we are certain down to the marrow in our bones that they are an evil state. They cause us untold harm, they kill our civilians, and they cause us a lot of misery, and we, at the very least, want to settle scores or take revenge. Not so for the rest of the world. If you have followed the events in the last 2 weeks, most major powers have asked for restraint. Most major powers have asked us to sort out this issue through dialogue, which implies they see us as two equal parties which are equally at fault, or stuff like that. The two nations that you mentioned, China and Turkey, they go a little far, and then they clearly say that Pakistan is not at fault at all. It is the Indian aggression. And they are willing to walk the talk and provide Pakistan with the weapons, the spares, and the supplies that they need. And as has been covered in our MEA briefing, the low-speed Turkish supplied Asgrad series of drones have been thrown at us in hundreds, if not more. Turkey's support for China is, for Pakistan is unwavering, and so is China's support for Pakistan. This we have to factor in our calculus, which I'm sure they're doing it.
Yeah, and if you notice that the recent MEA briefing, done from our side, there was also this mention made of Pakistan using the civilian aircraft, hiding behind the civilian aircrafts, which was actually mentioned by our side. And I mean, this also showed about all that Pakistan is capable of. But then help us decode what is the gravity of something like that in this war-like situation.
So hiding behind or shielding behind civilian aircraft to kind of fool the radar is something that most air forces think about.
Okay.
But we don't do it in a scenario like this. For example, our side is very careful about two things. One, limited, if any, collateral damage, and two, proportionality. I mean, we are trying to respond and by choosing weapon system and target in the manner that we do not escalate the matter. What Pakistan has done in this particular case is they have not closed the airspace completely. On certain corridors, they are allowing their civil flights to operate. And they're using the same corridors or the same airspace to launch their military missions.
Okay.
This increases the risk of us, in order to target their weapon system, it increases the risk for us to potentially take down a civil aircraft, which they would want to pin on us, which will also make for very bad optics, like you take out an Airbus and 180 civilians get killed and all that.
Yeah.
It won't look good. But the blame for this must squarely lie on Pakistan's doorstep. Unless they stop doing it, the risk is theirs and the blame must also be theirs too.
Right. But despite that, I remember you started the discussion saying that there is a low-level escalation so far. I mean, we have not really seen that the fighter jets have not really crossed across the LOC, etc. There's also been, no large-scale mobilization of ground forces, etc. have not happened. So let's just discuss, these couple of scenarios. What happens if better sense is instilled in Pakistan and they decide that it's enough, they are not going to get anywhere, and let's just de-escalate? Or because they are typical jihadi mindset, ruled by a very different kind of a mindset, suicidal jihadi mindset, and they want to escalate it further. Just help me unpack what happens in both scenarios.
So way the strategists sit down and design these escalation matrix is on assumption of rational actor.
Yeah.
A rational actor, whether you like them or not, is capable of calculating cost and consequences. And the game theory suggests that at a certain stage, when the consequences and the cost exceeds the potential benefit, a rational actor would seek either an honorable draw, or if that is not available, even a defeat to kind of limit the damages. So that's how the escalation matrix are designed.
Right.
We are not at that point where either of the warring side have reached a pain threshold that they can't take anymore. So there is a huge potential for this thing to keep escalating till one of the sides says enough. So typically what could happen is, right now, as you rightly said, on the ground, the heavy formations have not mobilized. So once the strike core on either side moves closer to the border, it will be escalation. If the Navy moves into some kind of battle formation and announces a blockade of Pakistani naval facilities, that will be an escalation. If the fighters deliberately and repeatedly cross the IB and the LC on either side to attack targets, that would be an escalation. There are chances of accidental escalation as well, as right now we are using long range vectors like missiles and drones, etc. If one of those attacks causes large casualties, or it takes out, say for example, a school bus full of children and all that, that would create a situation from which it will be difficult to walk back from.
Right.
That is what India's briefings are, that be careful, we are trying to limit it and the other side is trying to escalate it. Right. That's where the danger lies of unintended escalation versus the planned escalation. That obviously will be a plan.
All right. So you just mentioned all the scenarios and, etc., accidental escalation and planned escalation. But there's one thing that really intrigues me. So you said that, fighters are not really crossing the borders, but they are still being used, na?
Yes.
So what are they doing, frankly?
So basically, the fighters are being used in two roles, attack as well as defense, to put it more simply. In the attack vector, they are loaded with long-range weapons like on the Operation Sindoor day 1, scalp and hammer were used. They have range varying from 80 to about 200 kilometers depending on the profile at which they are released. So they're being used to launch long-range weapons. And they're also being used in the air defense role, one, to obviously counter a possible ingress, and also to threaten the other side releasing those weapons. So that's where it's a long distance relationship kind of thing. There is a ballet in the sky with each side trying to prevent the other side from making sure the weapons are not released at the optimum point. And also if they can get a lock within the permissible ranges of their missile to take those launches and shoot down the other side. So very intense fighter activity on both sides of the border without actually crossing it.
Right. And also, often, of course, we keep hearing it in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, etc., which is that today's battlefields have become very transparent. So how do you sort of factor that in when we're talking about the India-Pakistan situation here?
See, there is something that you see, there is something that you decipher, and there's something that you are told. So when it comes to something that you see, we have satellites, like typically the military satellites as well as commercially available Maxar satellites. One of your editors has done a fantastic story on how Pakistani firms use Maxar to obtain photographs of Pahalgam lately. That is one. And these satellites are also kind of used to see which submarine is in dock, which ship is here, how much armor has been mobilized, and where the troop concentration is there. We also have airborne sensors, including the manned and unmanned, which tells us the disposition of enemy and where their C2 nodes and the forces are displayed and all that. Then you get this information, you kind of sit down, analyze it, and think, okay, if it's got about 500 odd tanks in certain area, then if they decide to break out, that breakout will probably happen within 50 odd kilometers for the either side of where they are, because they would want to break out quickly. So that is where the analysis part comes in. For the public at large, it is the briefings conducted from the official sources that tells us what is going on. And when then briefings are not adequate, there is a huge vacuum of information which is filled by the social media, where all this nonsense and garbage is thrown about.
Right. And also, Ajay, before I let you go, just help me understand. India's objective is to basically teach Pakistan a lesson to not try and harbor terrorism inside India. In that course, of course, Operation Sindoor is going to be remembered as one of the most offensive, aggressive, clear postures from India's side that we do not want strategic restraint when you can fall this low and cross that threshold. So don't ever do a Pahalgam again. And I think Pakistan will also get that messaging. But where does it fit in? The larger calculus of Pakistan's ability to infiltrate the LOC, the larger regenerative capacity that Pakistan seems to have. So just your concluding thoughts on what should be the larger strategy that India must have.
At the grand strategic level, India would want Pakistan to not use terror as an instrument of state policy. At the operational level, they would want them not to send people here, come wielding a gun, line up our guys and shoot them down and go back. That's not really any state would accept. Sindoor was more a tactical level thing. It's basically at tactical level you execute a mission to have impact at operational and strategic level.
Right.
You have to understand, this one strike is not going to eliminate the terror infra in Pakistan. Right. It's just a message actually. And going back to the rational actor theory, if they are rational actor, they will realize that they must wind up those terror infra and rely on other instruments of state policy to get what they want get done. If they do not do that, then as long as their capacity to regenerate remains higher than our capacity to destroy, we will be in the same state, irrespective of what happens. So the target here is not really those terror headquarters or training grounds. The target is the enemy's mind actually. So the target is the enemy's mind. We want them to think like rational actors, that the cost and consequences will increase their pain threshold.
Well, on that note, one doesn't really know if we can really change the way the Pakistani state thinks, because, of course, we have tried many times in the last 70 odd years that we became two different states. But on that note, I will thank you, Ajay, for taking the time out and helping us unpack all these complex matters, which are completely shrouded in a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So this would really help, I'm sure. You were watching Worldview with Swasti, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you for having me.